I'm Nicole Mann. This is Dumber Than a Sack of Hair, and welcome back to All This Black That's Yet to Crack. So today I wanted to get on here and I wanted to do a video about HIPAA, or the Health Information Patient Privacy Act. What this is the doctor confidentiality law in the United States. And given that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, I thought that it was very important for you guys to know what your rights are for HIPAA. I think it's super important that you understand because I've had, for those of you who do not know, I'm a substance abuse clinician, and I've had multiple clients tell me about HIPAA violations. I've also spent a lot of time arguing with clients, trying to keep them from incriminating themselves because they think they have less rights and less protections than they really do. So I wanted to really explain the law, lay it out in detail, and then explain how this can be affected. Some things that have already been happening surrounding birth control and contraception and people violating their patients' rights. So to start with, what many people are not aware of is there's actually two pieces to HIPAA. One is the medical protection. The other is mental health and substance use protection. There's an addendum specifically to that. So with the medical protection, when you are in a hospital, you're admitted, your family's trying to find out where you are, what's going on, you are allowed to call a hospital, and the hospital is allowed to confirm or deny that someone has been admitted to a hospital. They can also verify admit and discharge dates and times. So that is completely acceptable. However, when you are getting mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, you cannot confirm or deny that someone is a patient due to the extreme stigma that sometimes is attached to getting help for mental illness or substance abuse. So if someone calls a place that is HIPAA protected under the mental health and substance use addendum, what we have to say, irregardless of whether they are there or not, is we cannot confirm or deny that this person is a patient, but if they are here, we'll take a message and give it to them. That's what you say, irregardless of the person is not there. They could not be there, and you still say, if they're here, we'll give them a message. Obviously, you're not giving the message, but it's the only way that you can do it where you can't confirm or deny that a person is here. So when someone tells you that, it doesn't mean the person is there or isn't there. It means they can't tell you. When it comes to the way that television depicts HIPAA, they depict it very badly, especially Law and Order. Throughout the years, they've depicted so many instances, and it was the 20th season in which they finally addressed the fact that they consistently have police officers saying to people, just leave the information on your screen. If you walk away and I just happen to see it, that's fine. It's not fine. It is specifically stated in HIPAA, you cannot leave sensitive medical information open on your computer screen and walk away. That is a HIPAA violation, 100%. So it took 20 years for Law and Order to recognize that you cannot do that, but you can't. It is absolutely a HIPAA violation. Most places that I have worked have actually require us to lock the computer. It's not just close your screens, lock the computer, because many the case management software, many of them, they keep you logged in. So not all, but many of them. And so unless it times out, you could still have people's information on the screen just because you closed it. If it's a situation where you have to time out for you to be required to sign back in, that's a very real issue. So one, it's so that people don't get access to medical records they shouldn't have. And even if they're just walking by and they happen to catch you, while you're working and see over your shoulder, that is a HIPAA violation too. If you know someone who is not a staff member, who is not granted the right to actually look at people's medical records, if they're looking over your shoulder, you are committing a HIPAA violation. You are allowing someone who does not have access to these records to see them knowingly. So if someone does come up behind you, whether it's a client, whether it's a janitor, somebody who does not have access to this information, you have to close your screen. it is definitely considered a HIPAA violation. If you know someone who does not have access or these kind of rights, is looking over your shoulder or is walking by you, you are supposed to close the screen. So that goes for both the medical protections and the mental health protections. That is definitely a HIPAA violation. The same thing with appointment books. That's protected because you are telling and confirming if someone is a patient. So leaving appointment books open so people can see, that's never going to happen. The way they depict it on TV, where people come in and they get all of people's medical, that's never going to happen. You're not going to go in and a cop is not going to get all your medical files. They have to have a specific reason in the warrant. It has to be specific. They are not allowed to fish through your medical records for proof of stuff. So that notion, and we see it depicted constantly, of people just walking out with all of your medical records, that's not going to happen. It absolutely is not. They have to be very specific and they have to be very narrow in the scope of what they're looking for. So when you come to the mental health protections, like I said, they can't confirm or deny somebody's even a patient. And with that being said, we do have situations, I have had situations where I have had multiple female clients tell me that they were reported to child services by the opioid triage center they went to be assigned a place, to be assigned a bed to get their treatment. One of these individuals was referred there by child services. So when you do the intake, usually what happens is at the beginning or around the middle, they'll ask if the person has children. The next question will ask if there's child services involvement. And then there's usually a box for you to explain the situation. So what had been happening is this particular individual, as soon as they got to the part asking if they have children, would get up, excuse themselves, and go call child services, which is a HIPAA violation. Just the act of getting help is not something that's reportable. And it's part of the reason that these protections are stricter when it comes to mental health and substance abuse, because you have people like this, because you have people who are judging people and penalizing people for getting help. That being said, I had 3 separate clients that had this happen to them from the same opioid triage. But yet at the same time, I've had male clients who have Nick Cannon levels of children, and I've sat in my office and listened to them say things like women are just dirty mattresses with cash registers between their legs. No one is calling child services on that person because of how their behavior and mentality could affect their daughter, but they're calling child services on women the moment they try and get help. That is why the protections are so strict. When it comes to what we can report, it is very, very specific. So when you see shows like Chicago Hope, and it was very frustrating for me to see someone report something, it got rolled out. It happens. You report things, and sometimes child services, they screen it out. They don't think it's that big of a deal. I had a situation where I reported something to child services. They screened it out, and then literally a week later, one of the parents was arrested for the very thing I reported to child services. It happens. It's not purposeful. It's just, you are mandated to report. You have to report certain things, irregardless of whether you think child services will take it seriously, because it's always that one time that you choose not to report when something is egregiously wrong. I have had an instance where I reported for something that seemed kind of minor, but I felt like something should be done. Maybe the family needed some support. I reported them. A week and a half later, I was contacted and let known that something far, far, far more egregious than I ever could have imagined was going on in that household. Had I not reported, not just the children, but the mother would not currently be safe. So that's why you report, even if you think they'll screen it out or they won't pay attention. You always report. And also, it creates a record so that if multiple people keep reporting, then they'll do something. So you always report, even if you don't think they'll take you seriously. There needs to be a record. So what we can report on as mandated reporters when it comes to things that happen in sessions or things like that. Children in imminent danger. Just going to get mental health treatment does not mean that your child is currently in danger. We're talking about people talking about the place where their child may be right now, that they gave their child to a friend and they're kind of concerned that that friend may not be taking care of their child properly, or they heard through the grapevine X, Y, and Z was happening. You report. When someone is talking about possible elder abuse, I've had a case like that where I had an elder abuse situation. I had to report that. And sometimes, when elderly people and children are in imminent danger, currently in danger, that's what you can report. What you cannot report under the mental health and substance use protections. Past crimes. It's happened. I have had multiple sessions where people have admitted to committing crimes while they're under the influence. Not reporting because they're not currently a danger to anybody. They're not currently engaging in that behavior. And I worked on a men's step-down inpatient unit. So I heard a lot of stories of sexual assault while under the influence. I cannot report it. It does not matter how I feel about it. I cannot report it. It is not a current crime. It's not a current danger. If someone were to sit in my office and tell me, I've been looking into how to get a gun and I'm planning to go shoot up my in-laws because they won't let me have my kids. That is an imminent danger. That is what you report. The other piece to that, though, is you must check with a clinical supervisor first so that you can ensure that you meet the threshold, that you are doing everything appropriately. So you're not just going to immediately call. You're going to double check with your clinical supervisor. You're going to make sure that you meet the threshold. Then you will report. So in these scenarios, in these situations, you do hear all kinds of things when you are doing sessions. People are trying to get themselves right. They're trying to get themselves better. And a lot of times people are completely different individuals when they're under the influence. I'm not saying that justifies any crimes that may have been committed. I'm just saying if you want people to get better, they're not going to come and admit and talk about these things and work through the issues that cause these to happen. They're not going to work on that behavior. They don't feel safe being able to talk about it. So that is why those protections are super, super narrow. And one really, really good example of how these protections are narrow and you cannot get around them the way they constantly depict it on television. Massachusetts drug lab scandal. Well, there were two, but one of them, the woman, Sonia Farouk, she was actually doing the drugs that she was testing, like literally all of them. And when she got caught and everyone was confused as to how she could just get diversion, which is basically going to rehab, when she was caught with an evidence box in her trunk, that's a felony. So the idea of them giving diversion to someone who has committed a felony is absolutely ridiculous, and they couldn't understand it. And there was a lawyer who suspected that his client had false test results put forth, and it didn't fit the time frame in which they were claiming she was using. They were claiming she only started using 3 to 5 months earlier. It's the stress of the job. This person's case, the stuff that he had been caught with, he told his lawyer that it was so stepped on, he didn't get even buzzed at all. And every state is different, but there's a certain threshold of percentage of purity that product must have in order for a possession charge to stick. And if it's under that threshold of purity, you can't charge them with possession because it's not pure enough to really even be considered, cocaine or heroin. And they were very, very, very sure that when the test results came back, that it would show it was so stepped on, they would have to drop all the charges. Well, that is not what happened. What ended up happening is it came back with an extraordinarily high purity, one that we just really don't see out here. And so the lawyer started to question, were they telling the truth? Was the prosecution hiding how long that this person had been using. And it turned out that the truth was they had been using way longer. They tried to get a subpoena so that they could get her notes, her case notes, all of her files from rehab. And they couldn't, because basically what they were doing was going on a fishing expedition. They were trying to go through her records, any case notes, to get proof that she had been using before this incident. And once again, that's not something you can do. You can't use HIPAA to fish for information. So they were denied their warrant. They could not get in to any of her files. But what they did remember was that she had she did have that evidence box in her trunk. And so because of that, they decided that they would just try and get the evidence box. I mean, it has been vouchered into evidence. Luckily, they were able to get a subpoena to look through the evidence that was in that box that was in her trunk. And one of the things that was in there was a therapy journal from a stint in rehab before the incident that got her arrested. And that was proof that she had been using far longer than the prosecution was willing to admit, and that they had been actively covering up how severe and how long her use was so that they wouldn't have to dismiss several cases. But what ended up happening was every case that she was ever involved in was just outright dismissed. They did a judiciary review panel, and that only happens when they think that a conviction or convictions, the way that it was obtained is so flawed, that they did things procedurally that were so wrong that you cannot try them for this particular crime. So the only thing you can do is outright dismiss all of the cases, because you can't, what happened with the evidence, it's just not fair to them to go ahead and try and retry them. It's super rare that something like this happens, but in this instance, it's what happened. So, like I said, the scope is really narrow. It is difficult to get a subpoena for mental health or substance abuse records because you can't use it to fish. And 9 times out of 10, that is what is happening. They're just fishing for evidence or proof or an admittance of a crime, and you can't do that. So when it comes to being in an inpatient setting, like I said, I've heard numerous kinds of things. I cannot even begin to tell you, working on a men's step-down unit, the amount of times I've had to give basic sex ed when people find out that they're going to be fathers while they're inpatient, and they're saying, I don't understand how this happened. I remember, like, most ridiculous, I literally had a person sitting in my office telling me that this woman had to be lying because everybody knows all women get their periods on the 1st. He seriously thought periods drop like benefit checks to all women on the whole planet. After that, whenever I had a male client who found out they were going to be a father, couldn't believe it, didn't understand how, I started showing Disney's sex ed video. And yes, Disney made a sex ed video way back in the 50s that was shown in schools for decades. I started showing that whenever I had a male client who could not comprehend or understand how he became a father. And it was a lot. I never thought part of my job would be sex education, but unfortunately, sometimes it is. So, with these protections and levels and things, and like I said, all the types of things that I hear, mandated reporting, talking to a clinical supervisor, making sure that you are following the letter of the law is a big thing, because the penalties for HIPAA violations start at $1,000 fine up to a $10,000 fine per instance, and 1 to 10 years in jail per violation. So this is a law. This is an actual law, and there are actual consequences when you break it. And I have had instances where I have watched somebody break HIPAA directly in front of my face, and I've had to report them because, and the police officer thing is a big one. We all take the same HIPAA trainings, but somehow in some way, people don't pay attention. I don't know if they get bored, but I've had people let police officers in. You cannot do that. You can't just open the door. And literally the response to me when I was like, what are you doing? Why is there a police officer on my unit? They're like, well, it's a police officer. I thought we could just let them in. Like I said, did you not take the same training as me that specifically stated you cannot? You can't just let them in? So, and that's part of the reason when you see on TV shows and you see on movies that police officers go undercover in inpatient facilities will never happen. It doesn't matter if you're trying to catch somebody who's hiding out in a rehab. It happens. People do it. They have warrants out for them and they go to rehab. Most programs, every program I've worked at, has a protocol in place to help people turn themselves in and clear their warrants. 9 times out of 10, the warrants will be set aside. The amount of people in my state, they fine you if a warrant is issued. You heard me right. There is a warrant issuing fee. And the amount of people that I have had who have had open warrants out for them because of unpaid court fees, and then the unpaid court fees get a warrant out for them, and then the fees get higher because then they have to pay a warrant fee on top of that. It creates a never-ending cycle of poverty that you can't get out of without help and assistance, which is why most programs have protocols in place to help people go in, surrender, and get their warrants cleared. And the idea that people are getting warrants put out for them for not paying fines, and then on top of that, they're getting more fines for the warrant itself is ridiculous. So, like I said, it's not unheard of. People do come in because they are hiding out. But that being said, that one individual that the police are after is not more important than the privacy of all the other people there. That is why many shelters have started providing case management services, because case management is protected under the mental health protections of HIPAA. They do this because for a very long time, police officers would just go into homeless shelters and do warrant sweeps. When it got to be the end of the month and they needed to make their comm stats, they would absolutely just go into a shelter and, check all the people in the shelter and see if they had open warrants. When it's a HIPAA protected shelter, meaning they provide case management services, they cannot do that. They need to have a very specifically worded warrant in order to get in. Otherwise, and I've had this conversation, I've done it, I've been at a door and I've told a police officer, I can't confirm or deny a person is here. I've fought with police officers, stopping them from walking in the door. So this is a very real issue. It's something that happens a lot. The police do try and violate HIPAA regularly. And like I said, you looking for one person or you hearing that one person is here, that's not more important than the privacy of the other 50 to 100 people who could be in that inpatient program. So you do not get to violate everybody's rights because one person, which is, like I said, why there are protocols in most places to take people in and help them clear their warrants while they're getting the help that they need. So, like I said, that being said, about 9 out of every 10 people have their warrants put aside so they can complete their treatment, and then they check back in, and at that point is when the judge decides, what are we going to do? Sometimes the judge will say, okay, if they're misdemeanors, if it's things that are surrounded around their substance use disorder, they will absolutely 100% just put them in diversion. So completing the rehab and completing the treatment will satisfy the things that they want. But with all of that being said, I have had coworkers who have committed HIPAA violations. When I first started my career, there were times where I did things that I didn't realize were HIPAA violations. When a client comes to you and asks you to talk to their parents or help them break some news, you can't do that unless they sign a release. They must sign a release with the person's specific name and what they are allowing you to talk to them about. It doesn't matter if they ask you to talk to their parents. You still need a release from them in order to do it. And so it happens. People think, well, they asked me to do it, so why do you need a release? Because you need a paper trail and proof. So that if someone does make a complaint and say that you violated HIPAA, you have their permission, you have it in writing to back you up. One thing that happens quite a bit, especially in inpatient care, is people will be referred by child services. And during that referral, something may happen. They may, especially in inpatient care, they could get in a fight, they could get kicked out, they could be caught cheeking Suboxone, and they don't want child services to know these things. If you pull a release for child services, when child services has asked you to do something, whether it's go to inpatient rehab or whether it's go to get mental health care, if you pull the release and they cannot confirm that you actually did what they asked, they treat it as if you never did it. So I always advise clients, change the release, narrow the scope, but don't pull it, because then you will not get credit for anything. You can narrow the scope of the release to just confirming admit and discharge dates and time, so that you can't talk about anything else related to their care while they were there. I've had multiple clients do that, so they can get credit for going and completing the rehab, but without the people from child services seeing what they struggled with, or that they may have, like I said, someone may have cheeked a Suboxone and give it to them, things like that. So narrow the scope when you have a child services issue, but don't pull the release, because if you do, they're going to treat it as though you didn't even do it at all. You'll get no credit for going, because they have no way to confirm that you attended. So always read the releases. You can, like I said, you can make them narrow. You can make it just for admit and discharge. You can just make it for proof of participation where they can't get any details. You can always narrow the scope of a release if you need to. But releases are super important. So if you do get mental health care or you do get substance use disorder care and you want certain people to have access, then you need to do a warrant. You need to do a release. Even with parole officers, we need a release. So if you are been sent as part of your parole or probation and you do not give us a release to talk to your probation officer, it's going to be the same thing as child services. They're going to treat it like you never went. They need to be able to confirm that you attended and that you completed. And it's happened. I've had many people who were there on probation, were sent by parole. I've had people walk out the door and I've tried to stop them. And I said, you do realize you're going to be in jail by 5 o'clock today. And they say, yeah, I don't care. Like, it happens. It happens. So HIPAA is super, super important now, and that you understand and know your rights under HIPAA, especially with Roe v. Wade having been overturned. Another situation, I've had 2 separate friends, one female and one male, who went to go get, my female friend went to get her tubes tied, and they repeatedly told her she was too young. They repeatedly asked her, what if you want to have children? She told them, I am bipolar. I do not believe I have the skill set to take care of a child. I do not believe I have the mentality to be able to raise a child. And even with that, they kept telling her no. She went to multiple people. What I don't understand is why, for the past 40 years, people in this country have been screaming at poor and mentally unwell people to not have children if you can't afford them or you do not have the capacity to raise them. Now you have a generation and a half of people who are listening to you, and they are not having children because they are self-aware enough to recognize they do not have the patience or the mindset to be a parent. Or more importantly, they can't afford it. I have actually had a man ask me why I don't have children yet. Because I can't afford it. I cannot afford to raise a child on my own on what I make right now. It wouldn't happen. I don't want to put a child into that type of situation. The response was, why do you women make everything about money? What else is raising a child about? Just providing them the bare minimum, the roof over their head, food and clothes. Money. It takes money. If I barely have enough money in order to provide myself with a reasonable place to live and to take care of myself and my needs, how and where am I going to get the money to take care of a child? So the idea that you actively have people trying to discourage people from adopting while you're taking away things like abortion, and Clarence Thomas is talking about limiting people's rights to access of contraception, it is ludicrous that then when people and I said very clearly, I said, when I have the means, I plan to adopt or be a foster parent. There are literally 500,000 children in foster care right now. And on a yearly basis, only 135,000 average get adopted, less than half. So the idea that I'm saying, look, I'm just going to adopt or be a foster parent because there are kids who need, they need homes. They need people to be there. They need families. Why would you not want someone when you are taking away their ability to get access to birth control, when you're taking away abortion? They're saying they can't afford it. They're saying that they don't have the mindset to be a parent. You're refusing to give her a tubal ligation, but then you're going to disparage people who are willing to adopt, who want to adopt, by telling them, oh, it's not the same. You're not going to love the child as much. Stop telling people to put stuff up for adoption if you don't want people to actually adopt the children. I am so sick of hearing people say to me, adoption is not the same. You won't love the child the same. Great. If that's how you feel, stop denying women the right to control their bodies and whether they have children or not. They are telling you who they are. They are looking you in your face and telling you, I can't be a parent. Hear them. Give them the tubal ligation. It's very simple. And it's not just happening to women. It's happening to men as well. My male friend went in and asked for a vasectomy. The doctor said, oh, you don't know. You might get married in the future and your wife may want to have kids. He said, okay, cool. So when I get somebody pregnant, I'm going to sue you for the child support that I can't afford. They signed him up for a vasectomy the very next day. Absolutely unacceptable. You do not have to take that. If you go in to get a procedure and a doctor asks you to get permission from another person, that can be considered a HIPAA violation. They are asking you to disclose your medical history to another person. They don't know that you're not in an abusive relationship, and this is how you're keeping your abuser from having access to a child to abuse the child as well. They don't know that you may have grown up in a very damaged, abusive background and household, and you want to ensure that your parents don't have access to children. I hear that constantly. I hear people say, I kind of do want to be a parent, but I'm more scared of the way my parents will treat my child as a reason for not having children because of how they were raised and the background and home they were raised in. I hear it a lot, which is why if someone is trying to force you to disclose to another person your medical history by telling you to go get permission, leave, go to another doctor. You do not have to put up with it. It's not acceptable. You're a grown adult. You are allowed to make the decisions about your body and about whether you do or do not want to be a parent. Go to another doctor, period. Or you can just look them in the face and say, okay, cool. So when I get pregnant, are you going to adopt my child? Because I can't take care of them. I don't have the money. I don't have the means. I don't have the patience. Are you going to adopt my child when I get pregnant? Obviously not. So what right do you have to tell me I can't get my tubes tied? And even if they say, what if you change your mind? You can look them dead in the face and say, then I'll adopt one of the 500,000 children in foster care. It's your right. It is 100% your right to control what you do with your body. And when a doctor tries to stop you, get a new doctor, report them to the medical association. They do not have the right to try and tell you. Like I said, these people are showing you who they are. They are letting you know they do not have the ability to be parents or that they cannot afford it. Listen to them. It will greatly be, it would really be wonderful, because then you don't have to deal with needing to get an abortion because you've already dealt with it. And so, but yes, we all know that they're going to try and make it harder, because when you have a Supreme Court justice talking about limiting contraception, it's very clear. This was never about children. This was never about their lives meaning something. Because if it was, every single state that is banning abortion would be adding money to the budget for foster care. And they're not. If this was truly about children, then there would be programs in place to care for these children. This is about forcing women to have children. After, like I said, you spent 40 years telling people not to have children if they can't afford it or they can't be a parent. Now you're trying to take away that right. You're trying to tell them they don't have the right not to be a parent. That's absolutely not acceptable. And the amount of stories on Reddit of people who agreed when they were dating, neither of them wanted to have children, then they get married, and one of them pulls something so that the woman gets pregnant. One of the most infamous stories was a man who got his girlfriend pregnant. He sabotaged her birth control, or his wife, it was actually his wife, sabotaged her birth control. She got pregnant. She said, "I'm not having this child." He said, "But I want it." She said, "Great, I'll have the baby and then we'll get divorced and I will sign over my rights to you." That's exactly what she did. And then lo and behold, 6 months in, being a single father, he's on Reddit crying about how difficult it is, crying about how expensive it is, crying about how his family won't help him, and asking Reddit if he can sue her to force her to take custody. Sorry. And I see this continually on Reddit, and I'm sick of fucking correcting it. You cannot force a person who gave over their rights to take them back. Once you sign over your rights, that's it. You don't have any financial or obligation to be in that child's life. You have signed over your rights. So you can't then go later and be like, "Well, I wanted this kid so bad, and I just assumed once you found out you were pregnant, your maternal instincts will kick in. And the fact that they didn't, man, this is way harder than I thought. I'm going to sue her." No. She told you. You insisted. Now you have your child, and you can't deal with it. It is so much more work than you thought. You don't get to go back and sue her and make her take her rights back. It doesn't work that way. And the same thing has happened with men. There are multiple stories of women stopping birth control and not telling men and saying the same thing. "I just thought that your paternal instinct would kick in as soon as you see a kid." That's not reality. I'm sorry to break it to you, but not every person on this planet has a maternal or paternal instinct. There are many people who can't deal kids, who can't stand them. They don't like them. Once again, they're telling you who they are. Listen. Do not go behind their back and force them to have a child, because you're going to be a single parent very quickly. If you date someone who doesn't want to have kids and you want to have kids, that's a deal breaker. It is a deal breaker. You cannot sit there and go, "Oh, well, I love them. Everything else about them is perfect. So, we'll just get pregnant and everything will change." It won't. Once again, people are telling you who they are. Listen. They don't want to have children. Don't make them have kids. Don't sabotage the birth control. That's wrong. And you're going to, like I said, find yourself as a single parent. So with all of these situations coming, with the Roe v. Wade, with all of these issues, I know a lot of people have questions about if their HIPAA rights are violated. What can a doctor do or not do? Like, what can I talk about in therapy? What is protected? If you have questions, on Instagram, I'm Geek Flossie on Instagram. DM me. If I get enough of these questions, we'll do another video and we'll answer these questions. We can even make it a regular thing. We can talk about the questions you have about mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, HIPAA protections. So if you aren't sure if someone violated your HIPAA rights, you are welcome to message me. I will, if I get enough, I'll make another video and we will go through them. We might even make it a regular thing where we do just a podcast where we talk about HIPAA violations, healthcare issues, mental health issues, the things that you see that may not being done well or right, or concerns you may have, or even if you're just, trying to find out how to get help for certain situations, if you need to change doctors, things like that. Another thing that happens quite a bit in this country is a lot of women, especially women of color, and it has happened to me, have had doctors just categorically not listen to them when they tell them they have health problems. For 15 years, I had a doctor, I said I had been diagnosed with Hashimoto. The doctor just flat out did not believe me. And for 15 years kept telling me I'm just fat and that I need to lose weight. I got a different primary care physician because of change in my insurance. And that first visit, the first thing she said is, why is there no thyroid antibody test? And I said, what? And she said, that's the test for Hashimoto's. And I said, they told me that it's about whether my thyroid function is low. And I can't have Hashimoto's if my thyroid function is low. No, that's not even what it is. Hashimoto's is when you have too much thyroid antibodies and it can cause a number of health issues. As she started to list the health issues, check. All the stuff that I was told was because I was fat is because I have a thyroid immune disorder. She did the test. Like I said, I tested, my thyroid antibody level was 100 times higher than normal. That's how bad it is. It's not an issue of if my thyroid levels are going to go low, if my hormone levels are going to go low. It's a matter of when they bottom out, not if, when. So for 15 years, I struggled with weight. I struggled with insomnia because Hashimoto's can cause insomnia. I suffered with digestive issues. I'm always cold, always. These are all symptoms of Hashimoto. And another thing Hashimoto does is it causes severe birth defects. So luckily, being responsible and choosing to not have children until I had the money actually saved me from having a child with birth defects due to the Hashimoto's. So, like I said, when people are, I've had issues with doctors my whole life when it comes to things like contraception. I cannot carry children to term for health reasons. And fighting with doctors not wanting me to rule out. And I said, I'm not ruling out being a parent. I'm just not giving birth. I can't do it physically. I can't carry a healthy child to term. And having doctors still refuse to give me proper birth. I think I switched OBGYNs multiple times before I want to say for the past, 12 years, I've had the same gynecologist who's been amazing, listened to me. And when I went in to talk to her, when I first met with her, she asked me, do you want to be put on an implant so that you have long-term contraception in the event something happens? In the event that you're sexually assaulted, in the event somebody doesn't use a condom, or any event things happen. Absolutely. She was the first doctor to suggest that to me, given my circumstances and the fact that I can't carry a healthy child to term. And that's the responsible thing you should do. You should be looking out for the welfare of your client while honoring the things that they want. So it is super important that you have a doctor that works with you, that listens to you, that hears you. And like I said, Black women, especially in the United States, do not get taken seriously when they tell people they have health issues. A lot of times they just get ignored, or like with my case, I was told it was because I was overweight, and it was not that at all. So it's very important. So like I said, Geek Flossie on Instagram, if you have questions about doctors denying you services, if you have questions about whether something is a HIPAA violation, feel free to reach out. And like I said, if we get enough of these, we'll start doing a regular session where I answer your questions about your HIPAA rights, your doctor-patient privacy rights, and issues you may have with a doctor and how to handle it when a doctor's not listening to you. When is it a time for a second opinion? So on and so forth. Feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, it's at Geek Flossie on Instagram. Down below, I'm actually going to put the number and website for HIPAA. So if you believe that your HIPAA rights were violated, you can report the person. And like I said, feel free to reach out. I will definitely be willing to answer your questions if you have concerns or you feel like your questions aren't getting answered. And I would love for this to be a regular thing so that I can help people answer questions, because a lot of times one person may have a question that tons of people have. So to get that information out there and to help you be better informed as a patient. So feel free to reach out to me. And until next time, be careful, because common sense is no longer common.